Hi, good day. This is Steve Barsh from Dream It in Philadelphia, and I'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion webinar today with building and maintaining your sales pipeline. We had a lot of people sign up for this, and we'll wait a minute or two for people to log in and get in because we just dropped the curtain. We have with us some really cool, fun people today. We have Kirby, who's VP of Sales and Marketing at Flocabulary, who's in Brooklyn today. Greg Lewis from Digitas Health in Philadelphia is with us, and Niko, who is part of a dreaming company called Redox from Madison, Wisconsin today, correct? I think is where everybody's from. We're just going to give it a minute or two more as people sign in. There's about 25 people signed in right now. Just for those of you just joining us and jumping in, if you have questions during the webinar, we're going to go for about 45 minutes, and then we're happy to bring panelists questions online. You can just hit the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and ask your questions, and I'll just kind of queue them up at the end. We'll just give it one more minute for people to sign in, and we will get started. Sales in, I was going to say in early stage companies, I don't know a single company. I have friends that are CEOs of publicly traded companies, and sales is always a top issue and a priority. So it's always a hot topic for people to talk about. People want more of it and to go more quickly through the pipeline. So let's do this. Let's get started. So we run on time today. It's 12:01 Eastern time from wherever you are in the world, but in Philly it's 12:01, so we're going to get cranking. Again, I'm Steve Barsh. I'm Chief Innovation Officer of Dream It. Thanks for joining us today. I wanted to go around first, and again, the topic is going to be about building and maintaining your sales pipeline. And I wanted to start by having our panelists introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their background in sales and what they're doing today, just for a minute or two. I'll start with who's in my upper left. Kirby, if you take a minute or two and just introduce yourself and what you've done in sales, what you're doing today, just so people have a point of reference.
Sure, no problem. Thanks very much for having me. Really appreciate it. It's a fun opportunity. I have been in sales for about 15 years, and my entire experience has been in the education space. So I've and almost entirely working for startups, ed tech startups, and have had an opportunity to work for a variety of companies that have had a variety of outcomes, some successful, some not. One of the successes was a company that I ran sales for that was acquired by Amazon. So I spent several years at Amazon helping to start Amazon's education business, K-12 education business. And I left that last year to join this amazing company called Flocabulary. And we basically turn your standard, boring, dry curriculum into hip-hop songs and videos, and engage students across the country and, in fact, across the world through the use of music and rhyming and just really innovative ways to engage kids in learning.
Wow. Okay, cool. So 15 years of experience, small companies, kind of slightly bigger companies like Amazon in sales. Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. Niko, can you talk a little bit about yourself and what you've done and what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Niko Skievaski. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I founded a company called Redox about 2.5 years ago. Since then, we've raised a couple rounds of investment, and really for the past year have been growing and operationalizing our sales organization. So we work in the healthcare technology space. We sell to other technology providers. We're an API company, so we have a business-to-business sale. We do a lot of inbound work and convert that into customers as they sell their products into big health systems. So as we're operationalizing our team, we've been learning a ton about how to do this. So I'm really excited to chat with you all about it today.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. Greg from Digitas Health, good day. Thank you for joining us. Can you talk a little bit about who you are, what you've done, what you're doing today, please?
Those two guys are a tough act to follow, but my background, I've had 25 years in sales and new business. Started with a couple of Fortune 100 companies. One was called Textron that owns EasyGo golf carts, Cessna, and Bell Helicopter, amongst others. And I went on to GE Capital. In those two companies, I was selling essentially money, right? I was lending middle market companies money to buy things like bulldozers and dump trucks and printing presses. in this Philadelphia region that I live in. And then I made a move in the mid-90s to a web development shop that was owned by Quest Communications, now it's called CenturyLink, and we were selling web development services to financial services institutions, banks, credit card companies, and the like. We were then spun out to form a startup called Cadient that was funded by Edison Venture in Princeton, where we had nothing. All we had were the laptops, desks, and chairs that we took with us from Quest. And then I made the move from there to come here, one of the Publicis agencies called Digitas Health. And now I represent Digitas Health and sell agency services to big, giant healthcare companies. But I also work for 5 other advertising agencies that are all looking for the same thing. So for me, building the foundation is where I start. And I'm excited to talk more about those foundational elements to new business.
Okay, terrific. I love it. It's the panel is very varied, which makes some very interesting answers and learning. So let me get started with kind of the first question I wanted to ask. And again, if you guys hear answers and you want to talk amongst yourselves, that's always kind of fun. What do you think, in your experience, is the biggest challenges to building a sales pipeline for an early stage startup? You're just, Niko, for you, it was just a few years ago. Kirby, you've been around a couple times, you've done it. Those early days, you're just, the biggest challenges you face in just getting that sales pipeline started. Maybe there's just 1 or 2 salespeople or the CEO selling. One of you want to take that, or I can ask?
Yeah, I'd love to start. It's fresh.
And by the way, if there's a bear over your shoulder, don't look. I don't know. He looks kind of scary.
It's terrifying.
The bear's our #1 salesperson, so I wanted to include her in the meeting. Her name's Candy. Yeah, but yeah, we're a startup, right? And as a startup, we were searching for what we were selling and who we were selling it to. And we still very much think of sales in that way, where we start by running an experiment and seeing who's interested. And then once we figure out who's interested, we try to categorize what that person looks like, why they're interested, go down the 5 whys route of really what is the root of your interest in the product. And then we use that information to try to find more people like them. Mm-hmm. And once we find more people like them, that's when we put our sales efforts into reaching out to those folks. So that's how we run our experiments. And we still do the very same thing today. We've found certain personas that we didn't think would be buying our product through this method. Mm-hmm. And we've operationalized our outbound efforts to hit those personas. And it happens in this iterative process, is that we'll be outbounding one persona, we'll be writing content, we'll be generating interest from another one to run experiments to figure out how to attack that next persona. So it's really this persona-based iterative learning process as we're figuring out what our product is and who our customers are. And as soon as we think we know it, that's when we start to put effort behind it to see if we can actually convert those types of people into customers.
Got it. So creating archetypes based off of those discussions and then narrowing down. And are you finding that you're creating almost like a different value proposition from a sales point of view based on that archetype or that model that you build, or how are you then using that?
Yeah. So there's a couple. I think of it like a grid. There's across one axis of the grid are the different value propositions that might hit each archetype, and then across the vertical pieces of the grid are where that person is in their buying journey. Mm-hmm. So we try to match that up, because the way that you talk to a customer and the way that you respond to questions is very different in where they are in that journey. So the buying process is going from discovery, kind of about the problem awareness, to actually trying to solve the problem with a solution, to making the decision to buy your product versus someone else's product. So we kind of see those 3 steps as a different mindset for, it could be the same type of persona, but we'll hit them with different content and different value propositions, depending on where we think they are in that journey.
Okay. Kirby, again, you've been through a few startup cycles and like most of us, right? Some worked out, some didn't. What have you found some of the biggest challenges for building that early pipeline in a young startup?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Am I breaking up? Okay. I'm having a tough time hearing the other folks speaking. There's a lot of breaking up. But I think something that I've experienced, and I work with a fair number of startups as a mentor in Boston for Learn Launch and some other organizations. And one of the classic questions is, who actually should own the building of the pipeline? And obviously, in the early days, it really needs to understands the product, they have the passion for it, they understand the value proposition or can communicate that value proposition better than anybody else. But at some point, it becomes very difficult to manage, essentially the funnel, right? So if you're doing lots of prospecting, at some point that prospecting needs to turn into qualification, and then the qualification needs to move into proposals, and it becomes pretty overwhelming. And so then you face that decision point of, well, now I need somebody to help me do this, but what's the right profile person to bring in? Do I want to bring in somebody senior who has a lot of experience, who has a Rolodex perhaps, or do I want to bring in somebody who's junior and sort of turn the crank of the prospecting? My advice recently has been to focus on more junior people, and focus on creating that prospecting engine, and have then they become sort of your sales development reps, who are prospecting and qualifying and handing off qualified opportunities to you as a founder. Obviously, at some point, you're going to graduate out of that and need to hire a more senior salesperson. But I talk to a lot of people who are at that very early stage, and my recommendation is typically start junior and work your way up.
So don't hire your VP of sales as your first person. Start with somebody down below, like you said, they can turn the crank.
Yeah, I think the hiring a senior person is a pretty risky move, and it can be very difficult to find the right fit. And it's an expensive hire. And I think also that bringing in a senior person before you've really figured out sort of what figured out your value proposition, figured out how to create that prospecting engine, and sort of validate that. Depending on who you bring in, maybe they can help. They'd be able to help you do that. But sometimes bringing in a senior sales rep is somebody who really only wants to do the later stages of the sales cycle. Right.
I would agree with that 100%. I think that building the sales machine is a founder's job. And then once it's built, it's very easy to find people who can run it really efficiently and probably much better than you can as a founder. But just like we say, from a technology company, founders need to be the one validating that the technology and product is the right product to be building. Founders also need to be the ones who are validating that the sales machine is being built correctly. And the assumptions that you're putting into it are actually being validated. Because if you hire a sales leadership too early, they'll come in and start running with assumptions without understanding the underlying nuance behind why a customer might be acting that way.
Right.
I think one of the keys, though, is the sales cycle. If it is a transactional sale requiring a lot of calls, a lot of outreach, that's a different kind of person to consider. And I think junior people work in those cases. I think if it's a consultative sale, that's a larger sale. That is a different kind of person. And quite often, a middle ground is to find somebody that has a different role in the organization, still has a lot of institutional knowledge or understands the product, the market, and have them transition, at least from a pilot perspective, into the role to see how it goes, because you don't want to shoot blanks if, in fact, you make a connection with your dream client. So, I do think there's a little bit of a nuance depending on the cycle.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the distinction is that I think that from a prospecting and lead qualification standpoint, no matter how simple or complex the sale is, there's still that sort of just baseline engine of work that needs to happen. And I think that, jumping to the more senior consultative hire, even if that's what your sale ultimately requires, jumping to that point too quickly is a very risky proposition, versus finding some more junior people to turn the crank of that prospecting engine, hand qualified leads off to somebody, either a CEO or, as you said, somebody internal who's been with the company for a while and can sell and articulate the value proposition. I just think that's the right sort of next step before you get to that senior consultative hire.
Interesting. It's a good discussion. I want to go down something that you guys all just said, and I see there's a bunch of questions in chat. I'm going to come to them in a minute, or people can use the Q&A functionality. You've talked about the crank and get prospects and bring in the prospects. What has been your experience, again, for kind of earlier stage companies, maybe pre-seed, Series A, post-Series A, for finding leads? And let me just tell you my slight bias on what the question I'd like to explore is, a lot of times I'll see in an early stage company, well, we hired a VP of sales and marketing. And I'll think, okay, so you hired a VP of sales. Like, sales and marketing are very different things in my mind. Marketing generates leads. It goes and does positioning, does lots of things. The leads go over to sales. Sales starts working on them. But you guys are talking about basically sales early on, completely doing the lead gen. And Niko, you were talking about assumptions and experiments you're running. How do you think about the difference for finding leads? Where are you finding them? Do you need a marketing organization, or is sales doing it all of it early on? When do you want to try to tackle that?
Yeah, well, so for us, it was really about content and about thought leadership. And I can never stress it enough, but I don't think a company is ever too early to start writing, to start talking about why you're doing this, right? And as a founder, you have so much passion in the problem that you're solving. Just write about that every week and put it out there on your blog. And what that will do is it'll start getting eyeballs on your website from Google, right? SEO will start growing. But what it'll also do is it'll show you the people who are interested and who also care about that. And those are your early adopter customers. They're coming into you now and reaching out to you because of that. And if you're doing it well, you're putting content out there that your customers will be inspired by, will want to change their behavior because of, and reach out to you. And that's how we find the personas that we end up outbounding. So inbound, which is a marketing activity, the inbound activities of creating content, of putting our thoughts and passions out there in the world, of really telling the world how we think it should be, the future state that we want to accomplish. That drives the very first people that we start understanding are these personas that we want to sell to. And then when we go to prospect, we look for people like them. So we're using that as kind of the play back and forth between marketing and sales. But again, like I said, that should also be a founder function right away. Start writing about it. In this world, we need to be producing content like that to grow yourself as a brand, both as a person and as a company. And that's how you're going to be validated in the market. They'll look at the stuff and judge you by it, and get to know you by it.
Right. Okay. Kirby, Greg, thoughts on marketing versus sales, lead generation? Where are your salespeople that are turning the crank? Where are those leads coming from?
I mean, I think what I just heard is that somebody had responsibility for developing the marketing content, whether that is the founder or somebody. So regardless of what the title is that somebody owns creating the voice of the company. And I think that's critically important. I think everybody needs to own the brand. If you're talking about the brand, if you're going outbound with the brand, you have to have some ownership of the brand, because that brand will evolve as your customers react to the brand and the product and the things that you're talking about. So I do think it does become, somebody needs to ultimately own the direction. Everybody should be, at least all the sales functions should be involved in directing or providing feedback on what they hear. And then the founder or the owner of the marketing, can decide what matters.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to bring in an audience question. Kirby, from something you said a few minutes ago, David Stevens asked, Kirby, what does a good or bad prospecting process look like? You kept kind of bringing up the prospecting, turn the crank. Is there some wisdom you could share on that, what a good or bad process looks like for prospecting?
Sure. I think good prospecting, well, let's start with bad prospecting, I guess. Bad prospecting is, the equivalent of, what's the analogy I'm looking for? I guess it could be a sort of rifle shot versus the shotgun spray, sort of spray and pray approach.
Lack of focus. Lack of focus.
Yeah. Right. So I think lack of focus and lack of planning and lack of testing what works. So we focus on deploying nurturing sequences. That where we have 7 to 8 email sequence that we send out, and we're pretty careful about testing subject lines and testing content and actually understanding what's resonating. But to me, like good prospecting is extremely purposeful. You have obviously a very clear list of your potential customers. You understand the various personas that Niko was referring to earlier, the types of buyers that you have a list that you have acquired. You might have purchased that, you might have acquired it through other means, but you have a clear list, you have a clear message, and then you have a sequence of messages that goes out over a period of time, and you're diligent and systematic about it. I think that would be sort of what I would consider to be good prospecting, but would love to hear others.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to pin. We all get hit with bad prospecting every day, right? Like 80% of my email inbox is bad prospecting. It's crap that you don't want in there, right? And as a company trying to sell your product, don't make more of that, because you know exactly what happens to it. Like I don't even open them; they just go away. They get filtered out by Gmail automatically now. So you know and feel what that looks like. So when you have a list, you buy a list of 1,000 prospects, 10,000 prospects. Don't hit them with spam trying to sell your products, because they don't want to buy your product yet. They probably don't even know that your product exists or that the problem that you're trying to solve even exists. So instead, hit them with content that you yourself would enjoy reading. And that's the #1 rule for our teams as we're putting stuff out there, is that if this is spam that you wouldn't read, like don't send it. We need to be hitting people with educational material, with interesting articles, with things that are funny, things that fit the brand voice, that amuse people. And you don't even have to tell them what your product is, because if you're getting them with content that is in your vertical that they care about, they'll research, they'll click your link, they'll find themselves on your blog, in your resource center, and they'll learn about your product. And it's a long-term approach to it, right? That list of 10,000, it's going to take you a long time to nurture that list to a point where those people understand the problem, understand your product, and actually want to buy it. You can't go out right away saying, buy my product, buy my product. You have to say, let me tell you about this space, about this problem. If this resonates with you, keep reading. If it doesn't, that's cool. You can unsubscribe.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that, and Niko, and it reminds me of the challenger sale, sort of mentality, and it's sort of applying challenger selling to prospecting, which I think is a really great, and it's also sort of pulling in content marketing. And I think you sort of captured all of that, and I think that's great. So there's 2 books that I think are, they're really influential for me. One is Predictable Revenue, and the other one is Challenger Sale. Challenger Sale would be the sort of much more consultative sale that Greg was talking about earlier. But Predictable Revenue has some really great advice on just really like in the weeds advice on how to run a nurturing campaign and how to do effective prospecting. And I highly recommend it. It takes about 30 minutes to read that section, and it can make a big impact.
I'm going to come back to that, because I wanted to ask you guys about challenger sales models, provocative selling, some of the different sales techniques. You were just talking about, though, on the follow-up. I think you were getting towards follow-up. I wanted to ask that just quickly before I forget. How do you go about following up without harassing people? And I would assume, it's just an assumption, that in sales today, for what you're doing, 80 to 90% of it is initially over email. You're not picking up a phone, it's not dialing for dollars. It's starting that relationship over email and then moving it towards either face-to-face, a web conversation, whatever it may be. How are you following up without pissing people off, without burning them out? Can you guys talk to that? Greg, if you want to hit it first.
Yeah, I think if you build on what Niko said a minute ago, if you are developing content and pushing it out to clients that is relevant, not salesy, essentially educating them on a topic that matters to that business, they happen to open 3 of those emails and you're tracking that conversation or those emails, the next phone call you make is, hey, we're out on the street talking about these 3 topics and we have POVs that we'd love to share with you. Are you interested? But you don't pick the phone up, or your junior person who's making calls doesn't do it until you see an intent or interest. And once there is, then your follow-up is very direct.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You shouldn't start with pushing your products because that gets people turned off right away.
Right.
Let them show interest first. It's like dating, right? You're not gonna go up to a girl at a bar and ask her to go home with you, right? That's that might be some people's strategy, but it doesn't work very well, right? What you need to do is build that relationship first, and you have to be value add to them and be genuine, right? Figure out if your product will actually help them. If it won't, don't push it. And that's the key thing, is that if you're being genuine, if you're trying to help, then you'll find customers who actually like you more than people who, got hustled into it because you had a freemium model and suddenly they're paying for something and then they'll drop out, right?
Right.
I'd add, I agree with all of that. I can be sometimes a little bit more old school in thinking, and I've told reps this, that if you're not occasionally being told that you're bothering somebody, you're probably not trying hard enough. So I do think that there's, there is inherent to sales some a bit of aggressiveness that's required. And I think that, ideally it's assertiveness as opposed to aggressiveness.
Right.
And there is a fine line there, but there is a certain level of persistence that is required to just get somebody's attention. And so I would just sort of stress that, don't be afraid to push people to be persistent just up to the point where you might hear somebody say, okay, you're driving me crazy.
Well, and that's a fine line, right?
Yeah.
And just like the dating analogy, it's a fine line between being too pushy versus, smoothly working your way in. But one of the things where this analogy breaks down is that dating is typically one human and one human. What we have at our organizations is you have multiple people in your company who can create content and push it towards one prospect. So you can have a multiple people attack from your organization. So what we like to do is play what is almost like a good cop, bad cop, where we'll have the great, useful, nice content, no pushiness coming from one person. Once we see them start bubbling up as someone who might be interested, we'll have a business development rep or something like that start being a little more pushy. And then if they push back, we still have the channel of the good cop who can still feed them stuff and we can get back later. They haven't counted us out altogether.
Got it. That's a good idea. By the way, I can't remember the name of the movie years ago. Maybe somebody put it in chat where they're like, wait, I thought we were doing bad cop, bad cop. No. We're not supposed to beat the crap. Both of them beat the crap out of them. Anyway, let me move around and maybe somebody will remember what that movie was. I can't remember right now. There's a lot of different topics I want to get to, and we only have 15 or 20 minutes left, so I want to dive into some things. I know a lot of times, a lot of the early stage companies that are coming to DreamIt that are mostly post-seed, pre-series A these days, always have a question around what tools should we be using? What's the perfect tool that's going to solve my needs forever? Greg, you were talking about, you're tracking. They've opened the 3rd email. Now you're going to start reaching out to them. So a couple of times we've danced around tools, and I'd love to hear, and everybody, all of you have run organizations of different sizes. I think tools are going to matter, but I know people always like to hear about, are you big believers in Pipedrive or Salesforce or HubSpot? What are your favorite top 1-2 tools? Early stage companies that are probably below $5 million a year in revenue, probably B2B enterprise sales, just to narrow it down. It's not consumer, it's not B2C.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite tools that you guys are using these days?
I mean, of course we use Salesforce to track, and then we bolt things on the Salesforce. I like to use vertical response to push emails out. It's a little more expensive, which means it doesn't get caught in as many of the spam filters because as many clowns aren't using it because it costs a little bit more. So I think the effectiveness is a little bit better. And I think their analytics tools are very good. And other things we use that are Salesforce add-ons. In our business, we use the List, which is a database builder which integrates very neatly with Salesforce. And now Publicis is using another listserv. So there's 2 or 3 that we look at. Once we identify our targets, we pre-populate the database, and then we start to hit them with messaging via vertical response. So just some basic stuff, foundational pieces that I think you have to have.
Okay. Niko, Kirby, experiences for you, favorite tools, what you've been using?
We use Salesforce, but it's definitely not my favorite. I think for people outside of sales, when you see Salesforce, you see right away it's a piece of crap, right? It's slow. You have to click around. It's not intuitive. But at the end of the day, it's if you're creating a pipeline that a sales funnel that needs to be unique for your business, and you want to report on certain things, it's the most robust way to bake that into it. And because everything out there integrates with Salesforce, all other tools will too. So that's why we were driven to Salesforce, not because we wanted to. We used HighRise in the beginning. We used Relate IQ, which was acquired by Salesforce. We used Pipedrive. We kind of bounced around, and then we, after our Series A, we had to step up our reporting to really show where we were putting our effort. And Salesforce was really the only tool to do that in. That being said, we also use HubSpot for the marketing automation. Okay. So our website, at least the public pages of our website, are hosted on HubSpot CRM. We put all of our content into it. We convert leads into contacts through that. Those automatically get logged into Salesforce. We do lead scoring through that. So we talked about people reading blogs. We have four different blogs based on where people are in their buyer's journey, with content that is fitted for each of these buyer personas. Based on that, we score leads based on what they've read, and what emails they're responding to, things like that. All of that's built into HubSpot, so it's kind of like the one-size-fits-all tool for marketing automation. Again, HubSpot's not very good software either. It's just everything works within it. It takes a long time to get it running. As a startup, it's a big investment to jump into a tool this big with this much customization. But what I would say is start with the content pieces and add things on as you go. Add on a landing page, add on lead scoring. Don't try to do everything at once because it's really overwhelming. You can literally have a person in your company, and I'm sure many growth stage companies have this, but a person who all they do is clean data, do integrations between your MailChimp, HubSpot, Salesforce. It's your full stack marketing analyst, right? At an early stage startup, that's really hard to balance. And it took us probably 1.5 years before we realized that we needed to employ some of these bigger tools to do everything we needed.
Niko, today at Redox, how many people are in your sales organization or somehow touching sales? Just so we have.
I'd say between 10 and 12 people. Okay. 4 or so on the marketing side, another 4 or 5 on the sales side. We have some solutions engineers who are brought in for the technical parts of the sale. Then we have 3 people doing customer success work, implementation and support, which we kind of bucket under that as well.
Okay. Greg, and then Kirby, I'm going to come to you in a second. Greg, when you were talking about Salesforce and you're using it, just give us an idea how many people are selling within your organization, and does that need to roll up to Publicis? Just to give us a feel when people are making comments, Yeah,
I mean, so I am the lead salesperson that makes the majority of the outbound calls. So I'm an N of 1.
Okay. All right.
For a $150 million company.
Wow.
For just Digitas Health. And the others, sometimes to the points that were made earlier, the managing directors are also actively selling as well, just as part of the job.
Okay. I can't imagine what a pipeliner's review is like with yourself. You sit there in a mirror and go, God damn it, how come you're not closing more quickly? Oh, I'm trying, boss. Kirby, can you talk to us a little bit, some of your favorite tools, maybe your earlier startups, you went to Amazon, now you're back at a startup. What are you seeing for earlier, and then as you grow, what are some of your favorite tools that you're using?
Well, I can tell you that it's really nice to be back in a startup where we have flexibility to make choices in terms of what tools we use, because going through Amazon's process to employ new tools was exercise in futility a lot of times. But yeah, I think I would echo a lot of the, basically a lot of the same tools that have already been mentioned: Salesforce, HubSpot. I think we're actually not using HubSpot right now, but we're actively looking into adding it to the stack. One of the things come up recently is we're doing our blogging through WordPress, and I guess Pardot has a nice sort of integration with WordPress that is a lower touch type of implementation than HubSpot. So for early stage folks, that might be more feasible. We also, one piece of software that we're pretty excited about that we've been using for about 6 months is Gainsight. Yeah, it's a customer success automation. So it's kind of the Salesforce equivalent, I guess, but for customer success. And it's got some just great functionality. We have a very long tail of small customers that we can't have humans touching them from our customer success organization. And so Gainsight allows us to do a lot of really smart automation. We can sort of automatically populate emails with usage data and send that out to customers without actually a person having to touch it. So we can do a lot of really good sort of customer nurturing through Gainsight that really allows our humans to focus on our high value accounts. So whether that's something that you would use at an early stage, probably not, but where we're at right now, it's kind of the perfect piece of software for that.
Okay.
I just wanted to add another one. Reading the comments, it is kind of overwhelming looking at these big ticket items. One that we really loved early on is Intercom. Intercom, by the way, does really good marketing as well. So if you look at how they market, I think that's a really good example of how they prospect. But Intercom's an amazing sort of chat add-on you can add to your website for very little, for really cheap. And it does amazing lead scoring too. So it tracks people through your site. And once they identify themselves through the chat, then you can start to put them into outbound channels, put them into drip campaigns through Intercom itself. So I really like that tool, especially if you're just getting started, because it allows you to have a very simple way for customers to interact with you through a chat mechanism that eventually identifies that person and puts them in a sort of persona track.
Okay. Let me tell you, we have about 10 minutes left, and we'll open up for more Q&A if there's more. And for those of you that are just streaming into the chat window, it's great because we're kind of monitoring what people are asking and talking about. And Niko, thank you for addressing that. It was in chat. The two next things I wanted to talk about, just to give the panelists a preview, I wanted to talk about hiring, just a little issue that we hear a lot about at Dream. I'm trying to hire salespeople. Some of your tricks and traps and best practices, characteristics you're looking for, I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to talk a little bit about sales compensation, base versus commission, some of that to open up on those issues. And again, this is all about building and maintaining your sales pipeline, but to do that, often you have to hire. So I wanted to expose that a little bit. The other topic I wanted to talk about is shortening the sales cycle. We Dream It, a lot of the companies going through Dream It these days, or all of them, are Dream It Health or Dream It EdTech. They're usually big, long, complex sales. Every one of the companies going through it, I'm just trying to figure out how can I shorten the sales life cycle. It's so long. So those are just to give you a preview to let you think a little bit. Why don't we talk about maybe the sales life cycle first, shortening it's not life cycle, shortening the sales cycle, excuse me. Tricks and traps that you guys have to try to narrow it down so it's not a 12 to 18 month process, but something a little more attainable.
I can kick this off. Being from the in the education space, which
who are you selling to in education? Are you K through 12, higher learning?
K-12. We're K through 12. Yeah.
Okay, so you're selling district level, piece of cake, no problem. They buy right away. It's, you put it on American Express, 3 days later you're done. Okay.
That's it. You got it. That's the model.
Sorry. So you're selling like K through 12.
No, yeah. So K-12 is a notoriously complex, dysfunctional marketplace that has really limited the success of many great, otherwise great companies. And I think that one of the things that I've learned, and this is very industry specific, so I apologize, and I'll try to be brief so I don't waste time. But at least in K-12, what we have found, or what I found really works is, and what Flocabulary does so well, is really building a groundswell of and focusing on bottom up. The top-down sale in K-12 is really a mess. It's a very risky proposition. It's very difficult to find people to sell effectively at that level. There are so many complications and red tape and bureaucracy to get in the way. And what we've seen is a huge shift in the way that purchases are being made from sort of top down to bottom up. And so if your product is designed for an individual in an enterprise to use it and to share it with other people, then you have the ability. I mean, sort of the freemium model, right? We use the trial. We use a trial as opposed to freemium. But it's a very effective model for us. And we have several different. We have an individual teacher purchase. We have a site school level purchase, and then we have the district purchases. So there's a lot of different ways for people to buy the product. And so I really believe in building that groundswell, starting at the bottom, working your way up, and using the data that you collect from those individual users, and finding smart ways for those individual users to share with others within their enterprise.
Okay, cool. And the classic example of that, and that's awesome. It's like Dropbox, right? Oh, look, everybody in your corporation is using Dropbox. Okay, CIO, I guess you better get control of it. Right. So bubble it up from the bottom. But I guess Niko, Greg, Greg, you're probably selling more, I don't know if you'd call it services. You're selling something different. Niko, I don't think you're not selling something that we can have a couple users doing an API integration to Epic. It's a little bit more all or nothing. Maybe Niko, I got a bigger smile, so we'll go with that. How do you shorten the sales cycle? And I promise, Greg, I'll get to you, and there's a good smile.
Yeah, so we obsess over shortening the sales cycle. And I always marvel at why DreamIt focuses on health tech and ed tech, because they're the most complex sales cycles, right? They are hard, long, they're arduous. There's lots of people falling out of them. In healthcare, well, a lot of things that we do. So we help our customers sell into big health systems. We're live in some of the biggest health systems in the country, and we did that in our first year. And it's because we help them get through and get over the hurdles faster. I think the number one learning you can do is, if you have a customer who you've gone through it with, become best buds with them and understand how they made that decision, understand who was involved in it, get to those questions after they've made the sale, after they're on your side now. And so that interview process of, who did you have to talk to? What committees did we have to get through? What held up the committees? In healthcare, there's always there's the clinical committees, what clinical impact you're going to make to a patient. There's the technology committees, security committees, compliance committees. You need to have all of their questions answered well in advance. So document that as you go through it, and use that as your library of resources that your sales team is using from time and time again as you're going through the cycle. But then also, surfing the actual budget cycles is important as well. Knowing when your customers—
Did you say surfing the budget cycles? Wow.
Yeah. We're talking about pipelines, right?
Right. Yeah,
you gotta surf the budgets. For a lot of these organizations, both in ed tech and health tech, they're nonprofits. They report their financials out publicly or semi-publicly. It's very possible to know when their budget cycle is, and based on that, you can know when their proposed budgets for the next year will be due. And they're staggered. So if someone has just proposed their budgets, they're just getting approved, they're not going to have room to buy your product. So if you're doing a more top-down sale, or a department level, or someone who has a budget, if you're doing that sale, respect that, ask them that, or try to do the research to understand that, and say, okay, I realize that you're going to be looking to allocate your budget over the next quarter or 3 quarters from now. What do we need to do to be in a good place for us to be part of that? Is there a pilot that we can do now that, based on certain results, we can turn that around and become part of that budget cycle? So really putting yourselves in their shoes, understanding what their constraints are. Big companies, Kirby was talking about Amazon, right? If someone's trying to sell to Amazon, it's going to take a long time, and you have to understand that they want your product. They probably want your product, but you have to help them deal with that bureaucracy. So getting them to love you and then helping them deal with their own bureaucracy has been a really great way for us to smooth that along and make it a lot faster to surf the pipe.
Cool. Thank you, Greg. Your suggestions. We had a question in chat. Actually, one of my target customers is pharma. I'd love suggestions on shortening the sales cycle. And you're dealing with a lot of pharma customers, a lot of preeminent. I mean, you work with some amazing brands. Your experience. Tricks, traps, techniques for shortening the sales cycle that you've learned over the years.
So I'm third on deck. You can call me chopped liver for this question. But,
okay. All right.
All joking aside, I think we take a strategy quite often with net new customers that's find a toehold and don't try to sell the big giant enterprise sale or the big giant brand sale. Find a toehold and then expand from there. And we know it requires talking to everybody. So I think the challenge that we see is that we may be talking to a brand client, a marketing client, talking to an IT client or a digital client, but we have forgotten to talk to the procurement client or the agency relations client. And we don't always know what that landscape looks like because every customer is different. But we try to map and be as broad as possible, get a toehold with one, and then really push them to understand more about how they buy. And they don't always tell you the truth. They don't always give you all the detail, but we always believe there's somebody else that we need to know. And we don't stop pushing until we understand all the different buyers. There's books about that, but we always know there's more than one.
Right. Okay. That's great. No, all that was really helpful. And Greg, I'm going to stay on you, and you get to go first on the next one if you're ready.
Guilt works.
Hiring. So all of you have hired many people, and unfortunately, probably let quite a few people go. What do you find are the characteristics when you're looking to hire new salespeople? What are the 2 or 3 things that you're looking for that you think this is going to be a good hire in sales? I'd like to talk about that and then a little bit later on compensation. Greg, over the years, what your experience and what your characteristics you're looking for?
Well, we started out this discussion talking about hiring senior level talent, and I think I break it down into high aptitude and high energy. And quite often when you get a senior level person, they have high aptitude. They seem like they know everything, but their energy levels to deal with ambiguity and with high volume selling efforts just aren't there. So, I believe that for early stage startups, hire to energy and teach to aptitude, because you can't teach energy. And especially if you have somebody internally that understands the market, understands the product, it's even easier to give them the foundational tools they need to be successful in sales.
Awesome. So hire to energy, teach to aptitude. That was cool. Niko, Kirby, you're interviewing people, the 2 or 3 things that you're just the person sitting across the desk or whatever, you're like, wow, this is the kind of person I'm looking for. What do they look like? What characteristics are you looking for?
So I'll jump in. The classic conversation in sales and in K-12 is, do you hire teachers and make them salespeople, or do you hire salespeople and teach them how to be educators, right? And I think that it's a false dichotomy, actually. I think that what's far more important is the characteristics of the people, and whether they're former teachers or not really doesn't matter nearly as much as I think a couple things that I just jotted down here. One is sort of goal-driven and competitive. So you want the type of people, whether they have sales background or not, you want people who are the type that really want to win at a board game. Those are the kind of people that are going to be successful. You want people who are obviously willing to work really hard, and then maybe even most importantly is coachability. I've hired a lot of really senior people who have Rolodexes, and they've been there, done that. They have a track record of hitting $1 million quotas, and yet they tend not to be very coachable. And the reality is that the people who were successful 10 years ago in a time when the industry was in a very different place, are not necessarily the people who are going to be successful today, and particularly if they're not willing to learn. So coachability, I think, is absolutely critical.
Kirby, let me just drill down on that for a second. Is there some magic coachability test that you've used or found that works over time? The person sitting across the table, everybody's in sell mode, right? They're literally trying to sell themselves to you, and you're trying to get excited. How do you test coachability?
Well, yeah, I mean, coachability, I think, goes hand in hand with humility.
Okay.
And I think that I think you can assess humility in an interview. Asking questions about, tell me about, what are you most proud of, and tell me about your biggest failure. I think there are some good questions. I'm sure you could Google that and find a whole bunch of them. But I really try to get at sort of the underlying character of the people that I'm talking to, as opposed to just the hard skill set.
Right.
One of my favorite questions is, what do you do outside of work? And I've actually had people tell me they're completely shocked that I asked them that question, because they've never been asked that before. But to me, it really tells me a lot about who they are if I understand the types of activities that they do outside of work, types of, the types of people that they hang out with, the types of activities that they're engaged in. And it helps me understand whether they're going to be a cultural fit for our organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Niko, characteristics you're looking for?
Yeah, so everyone but one person in our sales organization didn't have sales experience. Did not. And it's not that we were intentionally looking for that, but what we found was that the people who have been most successful, first off, they've been really passionate about the problem and about solving the problem that we solve. And that's the passion that our customers hear when they're talking to them. And it also brings a sense of, genuineness to the conversation when they're talking to customers. I think that's huge. That sense of passion also brings what Kirby was talking about, the coachability, because if they're passionate about solving the problem, then they're not necessarily stuck in their ways, because they just want to solve the problem for more people, do it better, do it faster. So they're looking to collaborate, and rather than compete with each other, they're looking to collaborate on actually helping them to solve the problem. And not to be hypocritical, but I think competition is really important too. So they're collaborating to solve the problem, but they're competing because it's fun. I love competition. What we found is that a lot of the people who who are on our sales team played a sport, either at the club level or at collegiate level, and they may have not even been that good at it, but the sport itself wasn't like I was a cyclist in college, like not a sport that people really think about or care about, but the discipline that goes into waking up every single morning at 5 a.m. and doing your sport, piled on with all of the other things that you're going to do, that discipline to do that over years and years and years, while it's not, it's not like playing football at a Big Ten school, right? You're not getting any praise for it. That's a lot like what sales is like. You're getting up, you're doing your job because you're passionate about it, and and most of the time you're losing. And that's what I think having that kind of athletic background brings. So some of the things that we look for, but really it's just, are they a problem solver? Are they going to figure it out? Are they passionate about helping our customers solve that problem? And do they have fun with competition?
Okay, awesome. Let me add one more thing, and then again, there's been some stuff in chat that one person put in, by the way, gentleman, Greg Lewis, added. He said one thing he likes to add as a question. Tell me when you've been terribly wrong about something as an interview question. But that was really, you're looking for, you're going to get the canned response, lemons in the lemonade. Oh, what's wrong with you? I spend too much time making everything so perfect. But that's
right.
Yeah. So the other thing I just want to hit quickly, and then if people have questions, put them in Q&A. You can put them in the chat. Compensation. So I've we've had a couple of dream startups. I want to hire salespeople, make them 100% commission. Okay, that's kind of tricky. How do you guys? What are some of the tricks and traps you've learned over the years? Maybe early on, a little bit later. What's base? What's comp look like? What's the split? There's not one right answer, but maybe some tricks or traps you've learned over the years, things that went terribly wrong in compensation, or things that went right, and how you think about it. Anybody want to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of compensation modeling over the years, selling mostly services, selling products that you can't touch or feel or smell or look at, right? Whether it's lending money or it's selling people an advertising agency or on an advertising agency. In those cases, we usually had a balanced approach between incentive comp and base compensation, because you needed people that really understood the customers, their problems, the market, the nuts and bolts of the business. So in that case, it was about a 50-50 split. If the target comp was 200, we would say 100 base, 100 incentive. But we've also developed products that we've tried to drive into the market. And in those cases, we ratchet the base way down and ratchet the incentive way up, still trying to get to a target comp. So we always work backwards. What do we think the target comp is at plan? And then what is the right mix? Then you can optimize that over time depending on how people deliver against it. Because people work hard, even if they don't achieve, if the whole team doesn't achieve, you may want to change it the next year so that you incent the right way.
Okay, great. Niko, Kirby, suggestions on incentive compensation, team-based, individual, what you've seen working or not working?
My approach is typically the incentive comp is roughly 50% of the base comp. So if there's 100K base, it's 150 total comp. That's sort of just that seems to be a model that works, at least in my industry.
Right.
I really shy away from the heavily incentivized comp models with a low base, because I don't know. I guess and maybe it's the type of companies that I work for, and that we tend to be very mission driven in the education space, and we need people who are really bought into what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think the more you make people sort of I don't know. There's a fine line between making somebody sort of mercenary, right? And actually bringing them fully into the fold and making them feel like they're part of the family, so to speak, that's promoting the mission of the company. And so I that's why in my industry I shy away from that.
So you shy away from eat what you kill, right?
Yes, I do.
You're not eating this week. You killed nothing. Niko, any suggestions what you found working, not working in your organization, or some other experiences you've had on sales comp?
Yeah, we've thought a lot about this, and I've been sitting here taking notes on these guys' experience, because we don't do any of it. We don't do quotas. We don't do compensation based on outcomes of the sales process. They're not tied to a number every month that will affect their actual paycheck. They get paid adequate base salary, and that's what their salary is. I talked a lot about passion, right, and about how we are really passionate about solving the problem. Our team is a bunch of millennials, right? Like after they have enough money, they're driven, at least what we've seen is that they've been driven by wanting to solve the problem and working with their friends and having a good time while they're doing something good in the world. And honestly, I don't know if introducing a compensation plan that is based on output will actually improve anything right now. Mm-hmm. So and we've talked about it as a team, we talked about it as founders, we've kicked it down the road, and we're still kicking it down the road because our team is performing well, and it's okay for them to say, oh, we're not going to be able to help this customer. Let's drop them on the newsletter and leave them there until we might be able to. And it just seems so much more genuine with customers. So it's something that we've thought a lot about, but haven't implemented it yet. It's a little scary doing it the first time. And I think the biggest point of me sharing this is that if you're a founder and you're early on, I don't think that you have to think about this problem until you start really growing your sales team. You don't have to think about it with your first hire, right? You don't have to maybe think about it with your second hire. But down the line, once you get to a bigger organization, like I said, we have 15 people doing sales work, and none of them are based on the typical, the standard model. Mm-hmm. But again, this is healthcare, right? This is ed tech. This is these are things that people can get really passionate about because there's a bigger mission here. And those are the people that we hire too.
That's such an interesting point. If I just can pile on. Yeah. I think, what we try to do is identify 5 people that we'd love to have working for our company. So we go out and individually recruit them nonstop. So if we don't know them and have heard of them, we go at them. Mm-hmm. And we try to be completely flexible with the compensation model. So, it may be a creative director, it may be a technology person. In my case, there's 2 new business people that I think are the best in the business, better than me, in fact, that I want to work here. And I have to give them or have an option that let them participate in their success. So to your point, you may not have to do it out of the gate, right? But in order to get 10 years down the road, the best guy in the business, you may have to allow him to participate in the upside in a different way. I think it's smart.
But Niko, can I ask a question just to follow up between the two of you? Niko, do you, and then we have to wrap up in a minute or two. Niko, do you have, if I may ask, a bonus compensation program or something structured besides stock options for all of your employees, not just sales? Like, if we do well, we're all going to win. Or you don't even have that in place yet, which would be fine. You're still early.
No, so our whole company, we have one metric that the whole company looks at, and that's the driving force behind everything. Mm-hmm. If we don't hit the goal, there's no guaranteed ramifications to that. Granted, we've only been around 2.5 years, right?
Right.
Like if we had an annual bonus, like we missed the last 2 years, right? But
right.
We're not a profitable company, and most startups aren't. And I think until we are, it's hard for us to justify paying ourselves more of our investors' money because we're adding the value in the world that our products that we want it to, that we think the potential is for. And I think this is, it's pretty, it's something that we're going to be tackling, right? Very soon as we raise the next round, as we look at this holiday season, we're going to be talking about this. And I think that at the end of the day, most of our employees will say, if it shortens our runway by a month, then I don't want a bonus. We need to keep the company going. And if it comes down to that, and it doesn't really come down to that, but we're very transparent about what our financials look like, what the runway looks like, what everyone gets paid. Mm-hmm. And we have that sort of very team mentality around it.
How many people are in your organization today?
Almost 30.
30. Okay. Just so people that are listening to your comments have a frame of reference. It's great. That's great.
I'm not saying that we figured it out and this is the right way to do it. This is a really hard problem. I'm just saying that we've pushed answering this problem down the road a little bit, and it hasn't. I don't think it's negatively affected our business.
Right. Interesting. Guys, we've got to wrap up. We're a couple minutes over. We could go on for a long time. Maybe we'll do a follow-up session, but this has been absolutely terrific and super helpful. I know every startup, every company we ever talk to has these issues about how do you build and maintain your sales pipeline and get it to be bigger. I appreciate everyone's time today. We'll put some follow-up content out around this and capture the best practices, what you guys talked about. We'll let you know when that's out. We really, really appreciate your time today. Niko going out for the run. That's very good for you. Niko from Redox, thanks so much. Greg from Digitas Health, thanks so much. And Kirby from Flocabulary in Brooklyn now and the report. Thank you guys for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks for everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a good day. Thanks so much. Cheers. Bye-bye.